He's in decent shape, but in decent shape in a Russian prison where he's been for 211 days, as you mentioned. He spends a great deal of that time in isolation. He's given 1 hour in the prison yard each day. He's working very hard to keep himself in shape, both mentally and physically. But we really just see this sort of stretching on far too long, and we hope that everything can be done to bring him home.
Yeah.
What's his degree of optimism and your degree of optimism that his incarceration there is going to end anytime soon?
This will end with the negotiation between the U.S. government and the Russian government. So we would just like to see more action taken. At the moment, his pretrial detention will last until November 30th. They have 12 months to keep extending that detention, so that would put us into the spring of next year. But it's so opaque, we don't even really know when he'll go to trial and what happens after that. So it's very murky, and that's the dispiriting part.
So is this a diplomatic solution, a prisoner swap, or is it actually, in fact, a legal resolution that you're hoping for?
One of the ways it will happen, and probably the most likely, given what has happened in the past, is through a prisoner swap. Mm-hmm. He has been accused of very serious espionage charges, which we, of course, will say to the end of the earth are completely false. But he will probably, according to the Russian statements so far, have to go through that trial before the meaningful negotiations can take place. We hope to short-circuit that process, but in the mists ahead, that's about all we can see.
So you suggested you would like to see the U.S. doing more here to push this. What kind of conversations are you having with the Biden administration, with those in government who may be able to help push this case? How committed do they seem to Evan's cause?
President Biden met with Evan's family at the White House Correspondents Association dinner and made a promise there to bring Evan home. So that's something that they have been relying on, that we have been relying on for action. We can't see everything, obviously, that the government is doing. Their public statements have been encouraging that this is a top priority, but we just want to make sure that it remains that.
Boy. Can you describe the conditions that he's in now? We spoke last time about the facility that he was staying in. Is he still there? Is he around other people, or is he isolated?
He's in the Lefortovo prison, maximum security services prison in Moscow. We think he's in okay shape. We have lawyers that go in to see him once a week. He's had a few visits from the U.S. ambassador to Moscow. So from what we can tell, it is okay. He's reading, he's meditating, he's exercising when he can, but it's a lot of work and the circumstances are awful.
I'm sure. Is there anything that the Journal is doing as well for those journalists who are not currently incarcerated in Russia but still have to do the kind of work that Evan was doing and that he is now being essentially punished for? What do you do to make sure that others don't end up in the position he is currently in? Well,
we are actually trying to be helpful in a position of another reporter who is in a similar circumstance. Alsu Kurmasheva from Radio Free Europe, Radio Liberty was detained in Russia recently. So the extent that our experience can be helpful to them, then of course we're more than happy to engage on that. I think overall what you're seeing is a real stifling of what little free press or independent press there was in Russia. So many reporters now have to cover Russia from outside, from Warsaw, from Berlin, from Dubai, from wherever they can, and it's just not the same.
We're spending time with Paul Beckett from the Wall Street Journal, who's working to secure Evan Gershkovich's release. As people consider what he's going through right now, and more broadly what journalists are facing on a daily basis here, we've got journalists in very dangerous places, and it could get a lot more dangerous, for instance, in the Middle East. Does it change policies at the Journal and the way that you look at deploying reporters around the world?
We've always, as I'm sure Bloomberg has, put the safety of our reporters first.
Absolutely.
In spite of having very strict protocols, bad things will happen, and that to some degree is the nature of the business. You do see a increase in violence towards harassment of and targeting of journalists around the world. We've seen it recently in the Middle East with Issam Abdallah, the Reuters reporter in Lebanon, who was monitoring a live feed, and he was killed and several other reporters were injured when that location was hit by a missile. So it is very dangerous days for reporters out there, and I think sometimes the press can be an easy punching bag. I think it's a moment to reflect on how many people do extraordinary things to bring us the news.
Producer Matt reminds us, Kaylee, 34 journalists killed in the line of duty this year so far, this calendar year. 510 journalists are detained as we speak.